Your seat. I just wanted to give a little background story about James. We met a few years ago, well, actually more than a few years ago. Telling my age. I've seen so much growth, and through the pandemic, I actually discovered Java with Jimmy. And I was amazed at how engaging it was, and the topic he covered, and the guests he invited. And as a viewer, James made us feel valued and seen. And so James had dedicated his time to his community. And so we want to, again, tell you that we see you and we hear you, and we're proud of you. Thank you. There will also be a piece of paper available to write any questions you have. Once you have those questions, you can pass them along to me. If you need to use the restroom, it's right here on the right. And all we ask is to please use the hashtag GBHXBPL, GBH News, Java with Jimmy, and Newsfeed Cafe in on your social media. Well, hello, young people. Come on down. Again, please feel to contact me or any of our member of GBH staff if you have any questions. And thank you. Enjoy.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is James Jimmy Hills. I am the host of Java with Jimmy at GBH, and I am honored to be here. I want to welcome those of you that are watching on Facebook and on YouTube, and those of you that are here in the News Cafe. I am excited to be here. A little bit different. Usually at home, I am the one that's running everything, but today I am very humbled and honored that there is a whole production team here that is going to monitor the chat on Facebook. And so if you have questions or comments, you can do that if you're watching on Facebook, as well as if you're watching on YouTube, you can do that there as well. But I am so glad to have the support of those that are working with the team today. This talk is being recorded by GBH News and will be published on their YouTube channel and also on the Java with Jimmy Facebook page. About today's show, our community is dealing with a lot of issues, from school violence, mass shootings, to urban and youth gun violence. There is a lot of trauma and grief in our community. About a year ago, I had the honor, I host Mayor Wu on my show once a month, and I had the honor of challenging her and saying, Mayor Wu, with some of the ARPA money and the things that she was doing around housing and mass and CAS, I asked her one day, I said, Mayor, what is it that you are willing to do with the stroke of a pen to address issues of violence in the community? And out of that conversation, along with one of my guests, I do want to pause for a minute and just, we're going to talk about healing today, so I think it's sort of apropos. One of my other guests that was scheduled to be here, Donnell Singleton, is not feeling well, but he and my guest that's here today, we started meeting with the city talking about the importance of healing and came up with a concept called the Healing Tour. We're going to talk a little bit about that, but I also want you all to be able to meet this young lady that I have known for many years. She said her age the other day, and it took me aback a little bit because I was like, wow, I can't believe it. But I would like to introduce to some and present to others Romilda Pereira. Romilda, welcome. Welcome to Java with Jimmy at GBH.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Because I've known you for so many years as a former youth, I have the pleasure of observing your journey. I tell you often I'm proud of you, and I see things that you are doing and achieving. But tell us a little bit about yourself, and we'll also talk about your healing journey as well. And then we'll get in a little bit into the healing tour and the community aspect. But who is Romilda?
Today, Ramilda is a mom, a community advocate, activist. I started and founded my own program, my own nonprofit, Project Turnaround in 2020. And I started that program, we had re-entry in the state of Massachusetts, but no one was working with the young people. And that's my passion, and that's where I come from. And So I started Project Turnaround as a reentry program for juveniles, those who are coming home from incarceration, and also those who are facing incarceration or have any court, criminal cases and things like that, probation, whatever have you. And Project Turnaround is based off of my own life experience. I remember, where I met you at. I was a young person. I was 15 years old and committed to the Department of Youth Services. And I was in and out of that system. But we had great people like yourself that worked with us and that was there for us and things like that, kept us safe. But there wasn't enough resources for us. So the recidivism rate for juveniles are high because of that, due to that. And I often think as an adult, what little Ramilda needed to survive and thrive and be a successful member in the community. So that's what Project Turnaround is about. And it's giving these young people better opportunities, resources, and not just them, but their families as well. Moms, dads, we can fix the young person, but if that young person is going back to a home where it's, lack of resources and things, it's easy for that person to go back into that type of lifestyle, whatever have you.
How important is it for you when we get ready to talk about healing? You referenced the fact, and I've heard you speak before, that you think about little Ramilda. How important has it been to you to really, one, recognize, let me reframe that. How important is it that we be real with ourselves, that we, as an individual, that we need maybe some healing? How important is that? And then how did you get on that road?
I don't have all the answers. I'm new to this.
Okay.
And for me, I've changed my ways and things that I would get into, activities and things like that, right? Remove myself from certain behaviors. But I always thought that changing in life was that, right? So let's just say, hypothetically, not that I was, but just to say that I was a car thief.
Yep.
I stopped stealing cars, I'm great, right? And that's what we assume, but it's not. Healing, which I just recently learned, maybe a couple years ago, is that I had to go back and heal the little Ramilda, so the older Ramilda can thrive and be successful herself. I was a youth worker for a long time, and a lot of the times I would show up with, some people would say, angry. We can't have a conversation with her, she's always going off. And those things are true. But then I had to learn, where did that come from? And that came from, as even though I was an adult and I was a youth worker, great positions and things, wonderful organizations that I would work for. But once I see someone doing something wrong to a young person, or you're not applying yourself or doing your job, and you're playing this young person, right? I go back to the little Ramilda, because the same thing that was happening to me, I now see adults doing it to children. So how I would show up is the angry little Ramilda, protective, right? So my first thing is to protect this child away from this adult, away from whatever's going on. And then I will argue with you and I would all that. But then once I went back and healed little Ramilda, which I'm still doing, and now I show up in a different form. I can have better conversations. I can articulate what I'm trying to say or what this child needs. That makes any sense.
You talk about your individual healing, and it's a journey, and we're going to continue that conversation and then talk about, because of your work, you're able to observe and have a perception of community and their healing as well. How would you describe your healing journey, where it is now, and again, what would you say to folks that are beginning their healing journey? Where are you now on your healing journey, and what would you say to folks that want to get on a healing journey as well?
I now see a therapist. It's not like that I didn't in the past. In the past, I wasn't able to connect with anyone.
Okay.
So
they say that getting a therapist sometimes is like dating.
Yeah,
is that true?
It is. It's like dating, or it's like hiring someone, right?
Okay.
And you just have to give people a trial period.
Okay.
Right, if that makes sense, because sometimes you don't connect, and that's okay.
Yep.
In the past, I thought, if I didn't connect, right? And I would just like, oh, this doesn't work, you know. But it's not that it didn't work. I just didn't connect to the right people.
Okay.
I also, something that's not so traditional, I also practice other healing, more going back to my roots, more cultural, more, how would I put this?
Put it plain. This is organic.
Sometimes it takes going out of here, right? So what I have been doing, it's not traditional, and in the United States, it's not legal in a sense, but I have been working with plant-based medicines, things like that, and it has been helpful.
I'm very familiar with sometimes these journeys involve what you were sort of alluding to. There are different mechanisms or modalities that maybe folks can get on a healing journey, and so I'm aware of that. Let's transition into, because of your work and because of your authenticity about what you've been through in life, you do have a pulse of what's going on in the community. I was sitting in a city-sponsored meeting with you a couple of months ago, and in the middle of the meeting, you're getting a text, like handling a situation. Where is our community when it comes to healing? How would you describe our community when it comes to healing?
Slow process.
A slow process. Okay.
Yes.
And do you believe that the healing is the responsibility of the whole as a community, or is it the individuals that then make up a healed community?
A little bit of both.
Okay.
To me, the reason, you also have to understand, in our community, mental health, there's a big stigma in mental health.
Yep.
So if you see a psych doctor, you see a therapist, you're crazy,
yep.
right? No one wants to be labeled as crazy.
Yep.
No one should be labeled
Absolutely.
as crazy. But there's that part of it. And people don't feel comfortable to tell someone else what they're actually dealing with or feeling with, where their emotions are. What I see a lot in our community, if you're a man, you're weak, right? Because you're emotional or because you want to cry. I also see many adults telling young little baby boys that stop crying, you're a boy.
If you fall and hurt, yep.
Right?
Yep.
So when you growing up like that, it's, I can't cry, I can't do this. So now you're stuck with your emotions and you handle them differently, right? Single moms. They're supposed to be strong.
Yep.
You have kids. You can't. Depression's not even real in our community. And I say not real. It is real.
It is very real.
But to so many people, you know, someone could be just laying in the bed, depressed and crying or whatever. And I've heard parents say, "Oh, they're not depressed. They're just being lazy. Just get up and go do it," right? But if someone's depressed, they don't feel like getting up. Most people don't even want to take a shower. So we have to get away from that. We have to get away from the stigma and love our people. Be there for our people.
Yes.
You know, it's like a delicate flower that's leaning over because it's not getting enough water. It's our responsibility to water that flower.
And that, I think, is a good transition to talk about. I talked a little bit about individual responsibility, and then there are, if we're very real, there are external factors that contribute to barriers of us getting on a healing journey. You talk about depression. A lot of people in black and brown communities, yes, there is a stigma, but then is there real availability of awareness of resources? I see a couple of questions in the chat about resources, but there needs to be the awareness, first of all, and then there also needs to be the awareness and availability of resources if someone gets to a point where I'm like, hey, or they may be like, hey, I might be a little depressed, where do I go? Where are we with ensuring that if folks are on that part of their journey, ensuring that there are equitable, we talk resources, but are the resources equitable when it comes to this space of healing?
No, it's not. It's like in our community, Dorchester, Roxbury, Mattapan, it's like a 6-month wait list to see a therapist at a local health center.
Okay.
We do need more therapists.
Yep.
We need more people that look like us.
Yes.
More people that can relate to us.
Can I interject? We say that often, but can you tell me from your perspective why that is beneficial to black and brown communities?
my personal experience, I saw a therapist one time. I saw her 2 times and it's like, I'm done. The reason that is, when I walked into her space, something was bothering me, and it was my brother being incarcerated. He had just got arrested again, and I talked about that, and I talked about a little bit about him being in and out the system.
Yep.
And I was very close to my brother, and what it felt like him being ripped away from me again. And she made a comment, this woman barely knew me, but she made a comment like, oh, if he keeps going in and out of jail, maybe he wants, like blaming it on him.
Yep.
And immediately I shut down because I went in and out of prison and DYS a few times myself. So when she said that, I felt like, you're judging me. So I didn't return. So those are things that someone that can relate to you,
yes,
someone who comes from a household where cousins, brothers, whatever, or neighbors are in and out of incarceration, they have a better perspective on things.
It does, the life experience does play a role. We do need the book knowledge to go to school and learn about the psyche and things like that, but that life experience is definitely an advantage when you're going to really reveal so much of yourself over to someone.
Right.
We're going to talk a little bit about the healing tour in a minute, but I think you will appreciate this question. This question is from, I believe, Nasia, coming from Gmail. As a youth, in my community, how could I help my community? How can I connect with people to find ways to help and spread the word about my community? I wish we knew the age of this young person.
Wow. As a young person, I believe all young people are very powerful, very powerful. Young people lead the way. I learn from young people every day, believe it or not. And they're more in tune, they're just shut down and not heard because you're a child, stay in a child's place.
Yes.
But their feelings are valid and it's real. I would always recommend to definitely take social justice classes, right? They're out there, join in the program. We have a great program in our community in Dorchester. They're at 614 Columbia Road, the city school.
Okay.
It's a social justice school for high school students, right? Learn about the different social injustices that we face in our community, and whatever one fits to you, or you can, definitely step in and you can always help that way, right? Make your voice heard. I always open up spaces for young people, and I think that that's on us. We have to open up those spaces for the youth. We also have to hear them and also know that what they're going through is just as valid and important as what we're going through.
That is something that's key. I was watching our film yesterday about the Healthy 617 program that we did, and there was a point where the young person felt that they weren't heard, and because they're young, they don't have issues. That young person is actually in the audience, so hopefully you guys can connect. Thank you for being a 16-year-old that wants to invest and work in community. We have to get ready to wrap up in a couple of seconds. And maybe we'll take some other questions. We did the healing tour for 4 weeks. We opened spaces to community. We're very transparent, honest. Some of the logistics were interesting. As we get ready to wrap up, what did you hear from community? And one of our last meeting was very interesting. I think before we move on, I would just like to take a moment and acknowledge, and maybe not a minute, but take 10 seconds of silence. Some of you are aware that there was a 12-year-old that was killed recently. I just got a note here, and as we do in a Java Cafe often, one of the viewers, Tommy Sweeting, I call him Man, he's asking for prayer because his son was in a car accident yesterday. So this thing of, there are multiple things that are always fighting our healing journey. But I just maybe wanted to take 5 seconds so I don't get in trouble with the producers, and just take a 5-second moment of silence for those that are dealing with loss of loved ones for various reasons. That was definitely an impromptu thing, and it is a process of healing about being real. But very quickly before we wrap up, what did you ascertain from the community in the healing tour meetings, and then what do we need to continue the healing?
We did 4 sessions, and all 4 sessions was in different parts of the city. Dorchester, Roxbury, Mattapan, and Hyde Park. In each community, they had the similar struggles and questions and answers, but it all looked a little different at the same time.
Yep.
We heard from people who caused harm, and we heard from people who harm was caused on them. We also saw that and learned what a lot of times the victim becomes the perpetrator.
Yes.
So I think it's wrapping our arms around both and, supporting both. We had moms who had sons that were incarcerated for committing violent crimes. And we had moms that lost their children, but them two could sit in the same space. But it's also putting a real story out there, and even for the young people. I do a lot of work in the Department of Corrections, as you know.
Yep.
I run restorative justice circles, and there's in Norfolk State Prison, they have groups where they're lifers, they're juvenile lifers. They've been in prison since they was 15, 16, and now 30-something, 40 years old. And, this guy might have caused harm to this guy's cousin or whatever have you, but through restorative justice, they were able to amend that. Mm-hmm. And now they're in the same space, there's no fight, and it's changed. But what I see is today juveniles, they're going off of a past beef that happened, maybe they weren't even born.
Not even aware of.
Right? And they just think we have beef. Orange team has beef with purple team. And it's just been like that historically. And they don't find out until they get into state prison that beef is over. They're not fighting it no more. And it began with them two. But by that time, it's too late. The young person is now possibly doing life.
We may need to do a whole nother session. I'm getting a note to wrap up, and we are going to continue to talk about the healing process, but I wanted to make sure that if you all wanted to follow Ramilda and get in touch with her, follow her on Twitter, we wanted to make sure you had her information, and it is at MILLI380 on Twitter, at MILLI380. We're getting ready to continue the conversation about healing. I really appreciate Ramilda being with us, and there was a lot that we could not tap into the conversation. But one of the things that I will continue about the healing tour when we were talking with Ramilda was there was sort of a consensus in the different communities around accountability. I talked to Ramilda about accountability as being an individual on our healing journey. There's also the accountability when it comes to external factors. There are systems and structures that unfortunately are often perceived as being limiting and perpetuating barriers that cause the issues that cause people to continue to move in their trauma, to function out of their trauma. There are some systems that we need to hold accountable as well. And so one of the things that we did find out in our last healing tour meeting, Mayor Wu did attend, and she heard from the community and made a commitment to go back and look at some of the ways that they are funding and some of the ways that they are engaging with some of the entities and individuals that are funded to promote healing in the community, to go into the homes and improve the quality of life. We're going to continue the conversation around healing. I have the wonderful opportunity to introduce you to someone who is just amazing. I've got to talk to him just a couple of times, but he exudes healing. Even in the embrace of shaking his hand, his tone of voice, the way he carries himself. And so we're going to hear more from him, but I am honored to present to some and introduce to others Daniel Strong Walker Thomas, who is, and I love this, the Chief Servant Leader of GIAA, and he's going to tell us us on what that stands for. But Daniel, I am so honored to have you here with me to continue the conversation that Ramilda talked about. We'll talk about your work and then maybe do a little more conversation about sort of that macro and community healing. But please introduce yourself to the audience that's here in the News Cafe and also virtually on Facebook and YouTube as well. Welcome.
Oh, Wanishi, thank you. What an honor. I'm very humbled by your introduction, Jimmy, from someone who does so much for the community, who's really gotten to this space from organic work. To hear those words from you is
I'm just going to chime in.
So
You're not going to make me cry today. So we're going to behave. Go ahead, sir.
My name is Daniel Strongwalker Thomas. I am the hereditary chief of the Delaware Nation Lenni Lenape people, and our homelands are New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania.
Can I chime in real quick?
Yeah, please.
Because I think in all our understanding and having this opportunity, you specified hereditary chief. School us real quick and tell us exactly what that means.
Oh, absolutely. So modern federally recognized tribes have elected officials. We have presidents, we have boards. A hereditary chief is in line of my ancestors serving. So one of my ancestors signed a treaty with William Penn, creating Pennsylvania. And so really what my role is a servant to the community. If there's a need or if there's something that I can do, I believe it's expected of me to be one of the first in line or one of my first with the hand up.
Absolutely.
So that's what a hereditary chief would do for our nation.
Okay. That's a whole, keep going, sir.
No worries. I'm also Turtle Clan. So the way natives introduce ourselves is before we would even say our name, is we'd say, hello, I am of the Delaware Nation, Lenni Lenape people. I am Turtle Clan. I am the grandson of Art Thomas and Doris Matoxen. I am both Oneida and I am Delaware. It's a pleasure to meet you. By doing this, we give our lineage and our background, and this is sort of how Indian country, we greet one another, because frankly, Indian country is very small. We might be related.
Really? But that makes me think about one of the popular movies a couple of years ago in Wakanda. They introduce themselves and say son of. So there is definitely major significance in knowing who you are, which is a whole nother part of the healing journey.
Well, I think your last guest spoke eloquently about that as she was beginning to discuss tapping into traditional healing modalities that weren't, mainstream, perhaps.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think there is absolutely something to knowing where you come from and the healing that you can understand what your people have been through. So for me to sit here with you, for you to sit here with me, there is a whole story behind that. In fact, this land that we sit in as we talk about violence is one of the very first colonized spaces of the United States of America. In fact, we're talking about gun violence, and Crispus Attucks was the very first gun victim, perhaps, that was heard around the world, as we call it, the shot heard around the world, literally. Crispus Attucks was a representation of the violence which were to come after, as he was both a slave or black man at the time and half American Indian. So it's really a healing that has never happened. We have never stopped as a society as a whole and said, these spaces need healing. These spaces, in fact, the word Mattapan, Mattatuk is the word, and what it translates to is the place of plague, the place of death.
Mattapan?
And so that's because this is where plague had hit one of a native tribe, and it's so words, power in words. And we see what's happening there. When Mattapan is a beautiful community, I know parts of Mattapan that are beautiful. I know people in Mattapan have beautiful spirits and ways of life. But there is a cloud that hangs over some of our neighborhoods here in Boston. And I can't help but to think these clouds were there well before it was called Mattapan.
The significance of what you just, and I casually say schooled us, gave us more information, informed us, almost reconstructing society, because I believe in these conversations, anyone that's listening today, anyone that watches or hears anything about any topic we're talking about, they are further informed by this conversation here today. And so tell us, we're going a little bit different from what I thought. This is an organic space. Ramilda talked about individual. You talked about what your people have been through. There's the slavery piece. There is this belief, and we've been talking about the healing journey, that trauma and grief can be hereditary. I've heard some clinicians even assert that there's a certain level of historical trauma that is carried within our DNA.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that? And then how does one begin to heal from that historic context, and then also sort of the everyday life situations that we need to heal from as well? A lot there, I'm sorry. But as a chief and as a servant, I don't mind putting that responsibility on you, because there's a need for us, and we'll get into the whole fact of being men and talking about a healing journey, but please help us.
You know, to really think about this, these spaces have such an aura about them, and we have never taken the time, Jimmy, to really sit down and to heal one another. Healing is a continuous journey, and it starts with us admitting we're hurt. So many things that we do in life and so many parts of our character are built upon hurt that we experienced.
Ramilda referred to that.
And we begin to build this armor or a false narrative or false expectations of ourselves in order to deal with the trauma in a way that we don't think about it, okay? We're often taught to just pick up and move on, right? Being tough is going to work when you don't want to, right? Being tough is a lot of these things. And you think about the idea of significance. And frankly, in Boston right now, as I see there are plenty of job opportunities. I hear the mayor is creating lots of job opportunities. I know there are other opportunities, but we have two fronts that I believe this should be on. Working does not bring a feeling of significance often to our youth. And that's a powerful statement, because working is what we have known forever to be a part of our character. This is what I do for a living. But what we're seeing is the conversion of advocation and vocation. The difference between what you do for a living and who you are. And a lot of these spaces do not comply to who we are, but expect us to do what they would like us to do. They're not really welcoming to who we are as individuals, but they are really looking forward to our work. So in order for us to really think about this, I think we need to look at our youth and say, how can we help them feel significant? I think entrepreneurship is a key way.
Yeah.
I really do. I think there's something to owning your own business, to giving training, to getting our youth in front of contracts that they can ask about. This feeling of significance, I do this, it's different.
There's the economic impact right there as increasing wealth and whatnot.
And not to get political, because the politicians deal with the politics, but honestly, that's something that may appeal to both sides of the aisle. As you're saying, I have this group of people trying to improve their life, rather than giving us a handout, give us a job, give us a contract. And in that way, I think it applies and appeals to a lot of different ways. But that's only one aspect of healing.
Exactly.
You know, this is only one aspect of healing, having a cause, having something that makes your life important, having a passion that you're chasing. But here in Boston, I'd also like to point out, as we speak about gun violence and such, Brother Malcolm X. You know, here in Boston, of course we know he was on these streets, and if America was not so in love with a redemption story, then all we would have ever known of Malcolm X is a hustler named Detroit Red.
Yep.
And instead, his time in prison and his time to think was really a pivotal point. Now, we can go on for days arguing the politics of Malcolm X and whether they were good or wrong. However, thinking about his personal journey towards a shift in energy, towards towards community building, it was time in prison, it was a new feeling of significance, and it was a new route, and it was redemption.
We could really go a few places there. In our pre-talk, I talked with you about crisis, and often that a lot of times we want to be able to help folks in the moment of crisis. And you responded in a manner that really surprised me around your perspective to crisis. And when you were talking about Malcolm, I do want to get into the conversation about, as men, it's important to talk about the healing journey, to acknowledge there's this piece of knowing is half the battle. But can you talk a little bit about when someone is in a crisis? Our community right now feels there's in a crisis. One of our viewers on YouTube, Thaddeus Miles, mentioned 4-year-old shot last night. 4-year-old hit and run last night. We can do better. Thanks for the moment of silence and discussion. There's that communal impact of what's going on. So how do we begin to deal, there's the crisis piece, but how do we deal with the everyday as well?
So I hear a few pieces: crisis,
I'm known
community.
to do that,
It's
I'm
okay.
sorry.
And the everyday modality of life, right?
Yes.
And this is the constant cycle. It's the cyclical nature. Rarely you think about the carpenter whose home needs lots of repair, or the amazing mechanic whose car is always in disrepair. It seems that we're always doing our best to contribute, but we are not really focused upon ourselves often. We believe that the sacrifice of working or giving away is what's redemption,
Yes.
is what is working, but we need to look within. I think community-wise, I remember being a youth, I remember being misunderstood. I have nothing bad to say about our youth. I'm sorry that they feel that the only way that they can be seen is when they're on the news for destructive things. I'm sorry that this is the society that we have given you. And I apologize to you for not doing more work to help prepare you and prepare our society for you. But frankly, we need our community to rally together against a common enemy. It's the only thing that brings people together. You see, solidarity and unity are two different things. Unity means that you have to give something up to be at the table with me. Solidarity means you come as you are. And now we need our groups to come in solidarity against a common enemy, which is our youth and gun violence within the state of Massachusetts, but also within the nation as a whole. I mean, and in looking at that, I think that when you speak about crisis, the first thing about crisis is, honestly, you're already in the mode, you have to help. I think we need to focus on preventative medicine. And the preventative medicine, because crisis is a whole modality unto itself, which takes some time, trust, and healing. And a lot of times in crisis, that time is not readily available to you, right?
As you said,
so you need this network set up for you so that when your crisis hits, you know where to go to heal. And so this preventative medicine comes in many shapes. And from an American Indian point of view, we accept every spirituality view. We do not want to change your views. We do not want to imply our views upon you. And we don't want to change anything about that. But what we think and what we do is we prepare ourselves. When you're getting ready for business, many of the things that we wear as a suit or as a business attire are actually reminiscent of historical artifacts to be ready for war. For instance, the tie is ready for war. All these things significantly try to do this. I think we need to be spiritual ready for a lot of what's going on. So as American Indians, we wake up in the morning, we're expected to wake up when the sun rises, to give thanks, because that gift alone itself was not promised.
Daniel, I hate to interrupt.
No, please.
We are, this is a little bit different than the regular, but we want to allow folks, because there's so much information that you're sharing, and we want folks to have the ability to ask questions. I believe we have someone at the mic right now, and then also Karine is here as well, and ask a question. What is your question here from the studio audience?
Yes, I'm Bonnie Northern from the League of Women Voters. And the question is about land acknowledgments. Do you have any comments about how to avoid having it become performative?
And I just wanted to repeat that the question is about land acknowledgement. And thank you so much for that, because we do, in hearing it more often, I think it is apropos. But then the question was the risk of it being performative versus the sincerity of it. And I know you can't speak for everyone that's doing it, but can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, terrific question. Thank you. And the answer to that is a bit of a story I'll tell you. Ready? Real estate developers buy pristine land, undeveloped, never touched by man. Before they begin to build, before they begin their plan, they say, let us give a land acknowledgement to the people who were once here. Now let's talk about developing this space and turning it into a mall.
Performative.
It's performative in many aspects. Now, are there institutions and communities that absolutely have put thought, effort, and into building not only a statement, but a meaningful relationship with the people whom they are acknowledging? Because that's the key. For instance, I have done lots of work with some colleges in Pennsylvania area. No need to name them right now. But what they have done is, rather than just simply issuing a land acknowledgement statement, they have also offered tuition reimbursement and tuition things. It's more important, the relationship with the people, than the words. Because as you hit right on the head, it has now become the social norm, and you stand out if you don't have a land acknowledgement statement. So it has become, in many aspects, as you say, performative.
Daniel, thank you for answering that. I am honored by everyone that is here, but there is a friend and sister here who has a responsibility of being the night czar for the city of Boston. But Corrine Reynolds is here, and she has a question. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Truly honored.
Thank you for having me and sharing this space with both of you. So, nightlife, that's usually where people find their third space. You have, work, home, and then their third space. And that's really where people kind of find their sense of community and where healing happens. And that's through music, that's through community. Can you all give me a good example of that being done right here in the city of Boston?
Corrine was mentioning that we're home, and I believe at work, and then there are spaces that she's over, and it talks about nightlife, fellowship, music, celebration, and food. What does that look like in a space of healing, considering nightlife?
It's very interesting. So I'm going to open up a door a bit on American Indian practices.
Okay. Yeah.
So many may be aware of powwow. Powwow oftentimes are just not just, I don't mean to qualify it that way. Powwows are often community get-togethers where they meet and they have a good time. However, once the general public leaves, that's when the community building starts.
Okay.
So the call to action is the daytime event. The structure and the community building happens in the evening. Often, most of our ceremonies that are very significant happened in the evening. And so there's that aspect, a community fire. There's nothing more sacred to indigenous people than a sacred fire. In fact, I know Rob Peters of the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe had once upon a time begun to speak about a peace community fire happening in Boston Common area, where all people would be invited to sit in peace around the fire. Structuring these events as socially fun events is a tough event, is a tough time starting from scratch. But as American Indians, at nighttime is when the dancing happens, the fire starts, and we're building community. So I think in essence, having fun, but also having the leadership build there is my 2 cents that I can offer your immense battle, and I appreciate the work you do. Wanishi.
So we were like, absolutely, let's give her a hand.
Yeah.
And I would like to just make a plug that Corrine needs a support, and I'm sure she's supported by the admin, but others that you just really made a case for healing during nightlife.
Oh, yeah.
So I definitely, we have some other folks in here that are very active in nightlife as well. We want to acknowledge the Real Boston Media that is in the room as well. We're going to take a couple of more questions. Glad to have them here. And speaking of other folks, and I think it's just so important when we talk about healing, that there are folks in here that move in the same space as I, but they're here supporting, one of which is Black Brown Boston. Vanya is in the room, well-known photographer and community leader, and just did a wonderful, huge event for Juneteenth. What she is what she would like to ask you is, how can you tell if you're truly healing? And I love how she said, not how can you tell if you're healed? She said, how can you tell if you're truly healing?
Yeah.
Which indicates the process in which you both, Ramilda, talked about.
Vanya, thank you. I think I'm familiar with some of her work, and I would really like to celebrate her too. I've seen through social media her working and adding to community, so thank you for what you do. Can you repeat the question one more time?
The question is, how can you tell if you're truly healing?
Yes. So I'm glad, like you said, that it's stated this way, because healing is a continuous process. One of the ways that I would say that you know you're healing is your internal conversation. How are you speaking to yourself? What voice are you using when you're talking to yourself? Mm-hmm. And when things happen, how quick are you to blame other people? Now, this is a different varying degree. We're all in different spaces with this healing. No one is right, no one is wrong. We're just where we are. Creator gave us everything we need to be okay today. But tomorrow we need to plan for, right? So when things happen, when crises happen, when you're confronted with issues, how quick are you to move that blame or search for blame rather than have an internal process? The longer and stronger your internal process before your reaction, I humbly believe, the deeper in your healing you are.
Vanya, was that Vanya's in the audience, and so I just want to get a nod. Vanya, was that sufficed? Okay. We have another question from the audience as well, and this is from Rudney, and thank you so much for the acknowledgement. She's actually the BPL Equity Officer. What advice do you have for the community regarding cultural change? We all need to partake and foster healing in said communities, in our homes, in our churches, etc. So what does change look like, the culture of change, and how do we all partake in it?
Wow. I think what we're really talking about are norms, associative norms. Okay. What is acceptable, what is not acceptable, and how do we hold each other accountable to these shifting...
There's that A word again,
the norm, accountable.
Yeah.
Well, you know, honestly, it is our communities that hold us accountable. When I speak here, believe me, I have a whole community who will speak to me after and say, I like this or I didn't like this, and I am held accountable by community, right? So the community changes that are happening, I think firmly that we need to trust our youth. And that's scary. It's scary, but we were once the youth, and the change of the guard happened with us as well. You know, so there's a level of trusting the youth, but there's a level of creating support for the youth, right. Creating this sort of way. But I'm reminded of this. My son, and he may watch this, and I hope I speak kindly and lightly about this. He is 15 years old. Parents who have children know that 15, that age, is a tough time. I'm literally meeting my young man every single day. How are you? Who are you? Right? I have to realize that I had an expectation and a view of what I thought my son would be, and my son is his own human being. So there's a level of now me accepting the change and shift of me supporting him on his route, on his path of journey, rather than projecting onto him what I believe it should be. And I'll leave it with this. We believe children are like arrows. You point them, you hold them as long as you can, and then when you let them go, you hope they reach their mark.
People like that. That is definitely a good analogy. We do have a couple of questions from the audience. Please ask your question. We are honored to have you here today, brother.
Hi guys, I do have a question. I heard you even just speaking about, about children, pointing them in the right direction and being able to show them, the right direction and where they see fit for themselves, and to be able to, for longevity, for personal growth and everything. Then I also heard you speak about community, how important it is to fight a common enemy and be able to accomplish that goal. And I couldn't help, as someone who does use social media for what I do and actually my everyday day-to-day life, how important is social media for those two aspects that you just spoke about, like guiding children in the right direction, and not only that, that communal piece that you were speaking on that's very important to having to fight that common enemy? Knowing that the development of our social aspects, because we used to use word of mouth, or if there was an issue. Now in the last 10 years, that social media, even for people in this room, I'm pretty sure that they're here because of social media. How important to you, and how can it be utilized to its full potential to accomplish those things that you spoke on today?
Great question. Use of social media, if I understand right, in the space of healing. When oftentimes social media gets a bad rap because it may not be often conducive to healing. It is the individual and the user. Yes, the platforms have some we talk about accountability. They have responsibility and accountability, but excellent question. Use of social media when it comes to healing.
First, terrific question, and thank you for thinking of technology in the term of healing, current times, and the whole process. And that's a major thought, which goes to show that we all add something to the larger conversation. First, let me say this, brother, with respect and kindness of social media. Nobody is trying to present who they are. Shoot, people don't even want to put their own picture. There's 1,000,001 filters out there. And in a world where we're looking for genuine connection, more and more social media offers us the opportunity to present ourselves in ways that are not true to how we're truly living. So there's that piece of it. Now, the piece of healing and community building is strong. And I'm glad you brought this up. My tribes, and because all I can speak about is my experience and what I know from my people. My people are divided into 5 different communities. For 350 years, we've been removed from Stockbridge, Massachusetts, from New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, all the way to Oklahoma, Wisconsin, and Canada. For 350 years, we have not met. We have not come together. We have not had land in common. Last year, due to a combined enemy, right? A local enemy we all understood, we got together on social media through Zoom first and then Facebook groups after, communicating nation to nation. So the ability for this tool to act in a conduit of communication, to spread the word like rapid fire, is amazing. Paul Revere had to ride how long, get caught and let someone finish his ride before he could get the word out that the British is coming. And now you can tell the whole world beyond Boston that the British are already here via text, social media post, or anything else you'd like. So, but there's a integrity with the information. And Jimmy, that's where we're in this library, this monument to knowledge, this monument to the written word, and yet now many of us believe that all we need is AI and our phones to get information, and therefore the information holds less and less value than it did. You have empty answers with some of these. So on your pursuit to build community, I challenge you to challenge your community to be their true selves. Give them space and opportunity, closed off from the public, in a trusted group where they can be themselves a bit. And if you're doing that already, more power to you and power to the people.
Thank you so much for that question. And I mean, I have to be honest, when you talk about healing, we can give that a hand, absolutely. Social media, you talk about healing, is definitely a modality that Java with Jimmy used during the pandemic, you know, so bringing people together, absolutely. We have one more question from the audience. Ben wants to check in and check in a little question about history. Ben, please.
I'm interested from the standpoint of the King Philip's War and how this economy can evolve with the Indian nations coming together as part of the United States. And I'm wondering what your view is on that.
Can someone repeat, just because we couldn't hear him, if we could repeat the question?
Blame my ears, not my heart, friend. I can't hear you.
Oh, mine as well. Mine as well.
I'm asking from the standpoint of the Indian nations, how the economy and the Indian nations become a part of the United States in this economic time to enlarge it. That's my view.
You know, it's interesting. My nation, the Delaware Nation, was the very first nation to sign a treaty with the newly formed United States of America. And in that treaty, we were promised a seat in Congress. And obviously that never came to fruition. Recently, I have been visiting Congress, and without outing the congressional representative who's helping me because it's not done yet, right? Let's wait till it's done. They are drafting a bill right now which would allocate not only a seat for the Delaware Nation, because my president is very fair. Women leadership is often what, as American Indians, we look for, the matriarchal power. Not to say that they can't go left or right, but oftentimes it's their children that they're governing. So, you know, female energy is a terrific space. So my president has made sure that not only will the Delaware Nation be seated, but all nations who were promised a seat in Congress be seated at the same time. Now, what you're seeing there is an investment rather than a diversion from the American system. Casinos and such were something that we chased once upon a time for economic development. It was an opportunity we had when the rest of the world didn't have it. We could open up casino spaces. Now you can gamble on your phone. So the overhead of a casino is just not important to us. What is important to us, and my nation is a striving example of this, is what's called 8A contracting. Direct with the federal government, and it hits on your idea of economic development. So what we are doing now is competing with other companies for government contracts, and in a sense investing into the system in that way. Now, as American Indians, do we fully trust the system? I don't have to answer the question. I think we'll all chuckle, right? So there's a piece of the cultural history where, you know, we're not fully trusting, but we're invested, and we realize the future for the economic development of our people. Now, as far as electricity goes, Jimmy, I don't know if you know this, in order for us to keep up with the current demand of electricity in our company, we need to increase, I believe, the entire amount threefold. And the majority of that comes from Indian country, where there is no development, there are no power lines, there are no power sources. So the economic impact of Indian country has yet to fully be seen. And the one piece that I'll add to you, which many people may not understand, is two things. One, It's hard to build homes on reservations because we have sovereignty, which means a bank cannot repossess a house on our reservation. So their want to give us a loan decreases, because why would they give us a loan if we're not gonna, we're good people, we want to pay our bill. But just like everyone, some people don't. And so that portion of Indian country has yet to see its peak of economic influence on the United States. So we are interested, but also we are looking to divest. We're looking to divest from fossil fuels. We're looking to divest from pollution. We're looking to, this current wave of lithium-powered cars is a beautiful thing in one sense, but most of those mines are on the Navajo or the Donnell reservation. And so this pollution and such is going in their water. So it's a very complicated question. I'm grateful you're thinking that way and that you're part of that conversation in economic development.
Thank you so much, Ben, for that question. And thank you, Daniel, we can give that a hand, because there are so many, what Daniel just broke down about the economy and how the different nations can contribute as well. The complexity of what you broke down there, I think, is also a good example of the complexity of us as individuals. We're on a healing journey. Ramilda talked about it in her segment. You talked about it. Black, Brown, Boston. Vanya named it as well. There's an ING there, which means that it is actively going on. And so the healing that needs to, because there's healing that needs to take place in the space of economics, equitable economics. There's healing that needs to take place in our communities around gun violence and things like that. Before we go, I always want to be a resource to community, and we've talked about maybe a demonstration or a way that maybe a breathing exercise or something. You are a healer, healing practitioner, and so with where you're comfortable, we're going to ask folks that are in the studio to join us, those that are watching on YouTube and Facebook as well. Even if it's your office, scoot up on the front of your chair, get in the space, and we're going to, and you can tell us if this is applicable to, I know we talked about crisis, is it something that you can do in the morning? Please lead us, and I would be honored if it's apropos to say servant leader or in chief. And I would like to talk with you because I am challenged to look more into my background as well. And so please lead us, sir.
Absolutely. And just so we talk about leadership and things, before we begin, I'd like to say two things. One, the common misunderstanding of the totem pole, and this goes to leadership. Mm-hmm. Have you ever heard, I'm the lowest man on a totem pole? Yes. I'm not important. That's wrong. Because the lowest one holds everyone up. Strength. That's right. The lowest one holds everybody up. So let's remember that, okay? Power and knowledge. And also, let us begin to think about healing as a moment-to-moment, in the bubble experience. Either you're in it or you're putting it off. That's every moment of your life. You're in the healing experience, or you're putting it off for either later today when you can focus on it or whatever. Okay. So trying to keep it with you. I'd like to do something, because as American Indian people, our spiritual practices are not meant for this medium always. It's not meant for television or the internet. It's often person to person.
The healing will not be televised.
That's right. Oh, that was there. I like that. And so what I'd like to do, Jimmy, is focus on you. I'd like to show this as an example, perhaps, of people. And don't worry, it'll be fairly easy, my friend.
Yes, sir.
And what this has to do with is two things. One, when we wake up, we give grateful, and we're thankful. No matter where you are in life, you're still breathing and you're here, and give thanks, please, because that's the beginning of an attitude of gratitude, which is one of the most important parts of walking a spiritual path through the native lens. And walking our path is meant for everyone who's a good human being. It doesn't matter where you are. If you want to be better, be better. But what I'd like to talk about with you, Jimmy, is cleansing yourself. See, as we meet people, this is an energy exchange.
Yes, sir.
And because I care about you as a human being, I'm sending you good energy. I'm wishing you well. I'm hoping things go well for you. And I hope this community all sees your value. And so this is good energy.
Spirituality and some things and whatnot, there is a part where when you facilitate something like that, you also need to ensure that you're cleansed and taking care of yourself and continue to be healed as well. So thank you for opening yourself to do that with me. And I want